Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and a very special welcome to a man all the way from, I wouldn't say the Northern Hemisphere, but just north of Australia. He's coming in live from Singapore, Mr. William Gilchrist. How are you, my friend?
Good. How you doing, Darren? Thanks for having me on.
I'm going very well, and I must say at the outset, most of the podcasts I've been doing in the last couple of months has been from the Northern Hemisphere, and we've had to work out times that we're both awake. So it's actually good to be able to speak to somebody who is relatively close geographically, because there's only a 2-hour difference between here and Singapore. So looking forward to this, and thank you for being here in the middle of the day.
Absolutely. You know, it's always fascinating whenever I go down to Australia for business, even though I know that we're close. When I get on that flight, I'm always still surprised how far that flight really is. At the end of the day, it's still far, you know?
It is. Unless you're dropping into Darwin, in which case it's a lot closer, but you're probably going to be flying into Sydney or Melbourne, in which case I think from last memory, it's about 7 or 8 hours.
I was surprised that it was 10 to 11 hours to Auckland, right?
Yeah.
So when we got to Australia, I said, oh, you know what? We're almost there. No, not at all.
It's a bit to go. Well, in most parts of Australia, I guess the weather and the humidity is different to Singapore. But I know we're just talking before we jumped on how even though you've been in Asia or Southeast Asia for the last 15 or so years or 20 years, it's you still haven't quite got used to the humidity in that region.
Never get over it. I mean, I'm a Chicago boy through and through, and we have the coldest winters and what we think are the hottest summers. I learned differently when I moved to Southeast Asia. No such thing as hot in America when you get to the equator down here. So,
well, I can just imagine, and maybe you can describe this when you get off the plane for the first time coming from Chicago, and you think, "Oh, yeah, Singapore would be nice." It'd be similar to what Chicago is. And what happens when you actually get outside? Does it like hit you?
oh my God, it was like drinking a milkshake was breathing, you know, like you walk out and you're like, I can't breathe the air. I need to drink it. Like it's a thick, frothy milkshake, you know.
I'm the same. Because I was saying we've my wife and I have traveled to Cambodia and Vietnam, and that was 5 years ago, pre-COVID. And I'd been to Bali many years ago, so I knew what humidity was like. But it's not until you actually get outside, having traveled for, I don't know, 15, 16 hours by the time we got there, and it just hits you in the face. It is a bit of a culture shock. Hey, but we're not here to talk about humidity. We're gonna talk about sales and sales leadership.
That's humidity too. Sales is humidity as well.
True. So, William, you're the founder and CEO of Konsyg, and I love this description, sales mercenary. Now, we're going to delve into lots of things, sales and sales leadership, and I'm really interested in a comment you made on a video I noticed, I think last week I saw, we talked about the art of sales being under attack. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about, the environment and some key, insights around sales and sales leadership for 2024 moving forward. Love to know, though, because you're a man from Chicago, who also is, and I'll say this, fluent in Chinese, although you said to me, well, my paperwork says that I'm fluent in Chinese, but I'm sure you are fluent in Chinese. Where did it all start for you, and what led you to end up creating this business, and specifically out of Singapore, because it's a long way from Chicago? And you also said to me before that when you're talking to people on the phone and you're talking to them in Chinese, they have a bit of a double take when they meet you in person.
Oh, absolutely. It's a parlor trick. And to all my Beijing University professors right now, he said fluent. I did not say fluent. I just said that I'm good. Because they're probably looking and judging this right now. No, I went to grad school in Beijing University, and got certification there through a program with Cornell University. But my history with China actually goes pretty far. I lived in China when I was 13, actually.
Okay.
Here, I was a student ambassador as a kid. And being a boy from Chicago and having that experience of being a 13-year-old boy living in Wuxi in kind of a very regular life for that year, it kind of changed my whole perspective of the world, and
Mhm.
came back home and was really just never the same again. Just had to hurry up and get through high school, hurry up and get through college so I get back into Asia pretty much. And that
Okay.
was kind of how I spent my high school years and college years, was really just saying the world is huge. I just
Yeah.
did this year in Asia as a pretty much child. And then that was kind of the reason why I was able to get back to Asia.
And what was it about Asia that was so attractive? Because a lot of people talk about, and I've got a colleague who's just leaving a role in Singapore to move to the States to work in the States. What was it for you that was so attractive for you to move back, even though you spent a year in your formative years?
I think it wouldn't have had as much of an impact had I did that year in Singapore as a kid,
Yeah.
because it would be very familiar,
Okay.
right? China at that time, and this is the 90s we're talking about, very different to what I was used to. Everything. I mean, eating patterns, different flavors and tastes, culture, how people express love with each other, how they say hello, the different sites, the industry. I mean, it was so different than anything I had ever even fathomed, that it would have been the equivalent of going to Mars at that time, right? Think about it. I mean, it's pre-real, it's pre-Google, it's pre, you know, YouTube, it's pre any of this stuff,
Yeah.
smartphones didn't exist. So, at that time, I there was one moment that really did change me significantly that I will never forget. And I always tell people, always be very aware of what you say to kids.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Might create either a monster or you might create a monster, right? I saw an American guy, and he probably had to be in his 30s. He was an American guy. And this is in the 90s, and he had one of those brick phones. And
Yeah.
he's talking on his mobile phone outside of his Mercedes Benz in the middle of Beijing. He's talking, I can hear his accent, and I'm a little boy, and I walk up to him and I say, "Hey, you're American like me." He's like, "Yeah," like that. He like stops his phone, like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Wow, but you're here and you have a phone." At that time, that was crazy to have a phone.
Yeah.
And I said, "You have a phone? You have like a mobile phone and a car, and you're American like me, and you're over here. Like how, right?" And he said, "Simple. You already got on the plane one time. That's why you're here now. Just do it again when you're my age." Like that. And boom, immediately I was just like,
Wow.
like my life changed right there. Cause, I did already get on the plane, but I didn't realize that that was really a big step.
Mm.
And I was so interested in this world. I never really thought, oh, I could be back in Asia. Never thought. I thought this is a once in a lifetime chance. I mean, being American, you don't really, think that this is. And at that point, I said, okay, what other countries are out there? What else can I do? So.
Well, and then from then on, it was almost like this bug that you had to satisfy.
Absolutely. It was never the same again. My mom always joked about it. He came back different, you
He
know.
came back different. And you said earlier that you were did you say a student ambassador's son?
No, I was a student ambassador
Oh,
as a
you're a
kid.
student ambassador.
So the student ambassador program where they
Right.
pretty much, it's like an exchange program. They trade kids.
Ah, okay. So awesome. And that was the beginning as a 13-year-old to say, well, the world is
Yeah.
my oyster. There
I
ain't
mean,
nobody
I've done
holding me back.
Europe. I mean, I'd done Europe before. I've been, the typical American gambit. I've done all of Europe. So, but before I got there, I'd been to already a ton of countries in Europe and stuff like that. And I thought, I was just like traveler. But
Yeah.
then when it came to going to Asia, which was something so different, just totally the opposite of what I'm accustomed to, that really did something to me at that
Wow.
age.
Interesting. And so from that in the formative years and coming back here, I know you worked for Google for a period of time in Singapore as well. I think from about it was about 4 or 5 years you're with Google.
Yeah,
Um,
about 4 years.
really interested in your take on that time as how it's formed what you do today, because people listening to this are going to be in sales, sales leadership, or even running sales teams, but they've got some form of idea or a product they're trying to bring to the marketplace. What did you learn through that process, particularly working for the big organizations such as Google, that's helped you, I guess, form your philosophy, your approach to what you do today with Consig?
I love that question's framed that way because I have a very interesting take. When I first came to Singapore, I was working for a company called TSL Marketing, where I did outbound sales, lead generation. Actually, I was a
Okay. Yep.
cold caller, 120 calls a day, constant getting the phone slammed down in my face, and then also being put into the Sandler sales training program. I had really good mentors around me who put me into sales training and things like that. So I was pretty much a groomed sales caller, inside seller.
Hmm.
Then I went to Google, and what I realized is that actually, and this is not a diss to Google, they had nothing to give me in terms of sales training.
Okay.
There was no actual sales development. It's not really a sales organization. So being a part of a sales organization and then going into a company like that, I had to learn new skill sets, which was extremely beneficial to how I saw the world, how I saw technology, how I saw business, but not necessarily an asset to any kind of sales skills at all. In fact, these larger corporations are more designed for how to navigate the company or how to navigate systems and how
Yeah.
to, you know, push the goal of the company, not pure outbound raw sales skills,
Yeah.
understanding objection handling. I mean, if anything, they're getting that material from an external source, maybe where I was previously working, and then they are
Sure.
just rotating it. But Google did give me the most amazing gift, which was understanding how the world works from an aerial view. I mean, it's kind of like being in a spaceship. You can see the whole world, how it all connects, how technologies connect, how the different markets operate with each other, dealing with different types of businesses, different type of business owners. You can, and then you have, big budget, right? You can fly to Japan and be in a business meeting there, and then next you're in Delhi, and then suddenly you're down in Melbourne for a little
Yeah.
while. Then you hop over to Sydney on your way back up to Dublin. So once you start doing that, you start to see the world differently. And Google definitely gives that. But when it comes down to the actual, sorry, my Google Home almost just started talking. So you can keep this on the recording. It's totally fine.
That's
Uh,
all good.
See, I still use Google products. Being in that environment where I was able to see so many different countries in such a short period of time. I mean, the places that I was going to with Google, um, that combined with the sales experience that I had prior to joining,
Yeah.
that definitely put a twinkle in my eye a bit about, the world is actually not as big as we think.
Yeah.
And sales is a challenge even for a big organization,
It is.
as well as it is for small ones.
At least with a big organization such as Google, it probably opens doors because just about every single person on the planet has heard of them. And like they used to say back in the day when I was in telecommunications, nobody ever got sacked for employing somebody from IBM or buying a service from IBM. So it would at least open doors for you. But how much of that though do you think? And I know you mentioned before it wasn't necessarily the sales game, it was more about navigating within the big organization. How much of a challenge do you find that within the business that you're working for a big behemoth that I don't know, could it become almost like a level of complacency that, hey, I don't have to work as hard as perhaps you had to work previously in a big company like that because you're one of a multitude of people?
I love that question. There's so many things that I could say about that. One, the assumption is that when you work for a large brand like Google, that it opens doors and that people will be willing to buy from you. 60% of the people just wanted the free lunch or wanted to be able to say that it talks from Google or be able to take your business card and kind of show it around. Like, oh, Google's talking to us, or we're
Yeah,
in talk with Google, right? That would happen all the time.
yeah,
It doesn't necessarily translate into sales numbers, nor your quota, nor your target, right? Your target keeps going up. And you're like, I'm in a lot of conversations. Everybody would talk, but that doesn't mean they're buying,
yeah,
right? So I had to exercise a very different level of sales skills, which is the personal relationship.
yeah,
I'm selling Google products. I'm William, who happens to be at Google. I'm your guy at Google that you
yeah,
can talk to for these particular services. So I had to shift my approach a bit because everybody knew the products already, or whatever we could potentially do, and they had the interest, but
mm,
not necessarily willing to go into their wallet to do it. When it comes to what it does to the psyche, I think of me, and I'll speak of myself. Um, you do get to a point where you're like, I'm closing business, but did I really close it, or was Google like I knew I was pretty good before I came in here? but am I, is this really a thing? And that was actually a question that I had to ask myself, during my exit.
Mm,
And my dad always had this amazing quote that I will always carry. He said, "Look, son, you're in Google now, but you always have to ask yourself, do you want to be a cat in a castle or do you want to be a lion in a jungle?" And the difference is that the jungle is terrible. The
yeah,
jungle get eaten, but you're a lion in it and you
yeah.
can decide what you're going to do. But being a cat in a castle is amazing as well. You can ride that out for the rest of your life. You get warm milk,
Oh,
fireplace, it's great,
and
right?
there's probably a big supply of mice as well in that big
Exactly.
castle.
Exactly. But you're always going to be a cat,
That's
and
it.
that always rang in my head. I think in the last 2 years in Google, I was
Yeah,
kind of, am I really that good? And do I really want to be in a cog in this wheel,
yeah.
and do everything for the glory of the flag? Or do I want to do something that could help a lot of companies, a lot of people? And, I would see companies all the time that were struggling with things that I could have easily helped them with, but because of the brand that I was behind, it
Yes.
was policy to be able to provide that type of assistance. And that just started to, yeah, after a few years of Google lunches and dinners and all that amazing stuff, you start to think about things differently and say, I could probably do more.
Well, it's a really interesting point you make because I worked for two big organizations here in Australia, Optus and then Telstra in the telecommunications market, right? So, and I remember when I joined Telstra, they said to me, "Hey, whatever you do, don't try to push the big behemoth that is Telstra in terms of the processes. Like there'll be a lot of stuff you don't enjoy. There'll be a lot of things you don't agree with in terms of how they do business, but there's also going to be a lot of people that you're going to deal with within the business who are very Telstra sized, and in your case, probably very Google sized, right? So, and we use this term institutionalization, where people get caught up in, well, I'm just part of, I am literally a cat for life in this big castle, right?
Mhm.
Um, you obviously found, and maybe it was through the advice your dad gave you in terms of you could either be that lion in the jungle or remain a cat in a castle. What do you see in big organizations such as Google that perhaps hampers people's development rather than enhances their development?
Well, I think in a big organization, and the reason why I'm smiling because there's just so many checkbox, and I know you've been in a big organization too. I think we can kind of share that laughter. I think the first thing is that there's very little honesty in organizations. Like, are people really telling the truth in
Yeah,
terms of meetings, in terms of the targets, in terms of just reality? Most people are trying to look after their careers, their jobs, secure that, right?
yeah,
um, there's very little actual leadership, and leadership can be very self-sacrificial, right? You come last as the leader. Yeah, you
mm,
might get paid the most, but you're the one who gets paid last. Everybody develops before anything,
mm,
right? And I've always tried to be that type of leader in my organization to where, I've gotten this feedback. It's like, I'm focused on you and your development. Everything that we're doing is excellent, but if I don't see you improving within the sphere that you want to improve and who you want to be in this organization, you need to figure out where you either want to be within this organization or elsewhere, right?
yeah,
That doesn't happen in big orgs, right? You kind of
yeah,
have to fit a certain checkbox. Did you go through the training, which is a preset situation? No one's really looking after you. We could say, oh, I have office hours for coaching sessions, but really coaching is not actually happening. It's just general advice in terms of company jargon. I sound so jaded. I'm not jaded. I love Google, by the way. But it was time for me to leave because I started to realize there's a lot of repetitive stuff. And also a lot of narratives that come from top down. People
yeah,
kind of have to get behind, even if they're bad ideas, right? You can
yes,
have something that says, hey, look, our sales target for this year, I remember it was 10x one year. That was the buzzword. 10x. We're gonna 10 times everything that we're doing. It's like, has anybody even done the math on like the market? We're not gonna 10x out of Vietnam when there's no mobile phone penetration in terms of credit cards. Like that physically can't happen. Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
it does. But
Sounds
10x,
good though. Sounds awesome.
we got to go with this. We
Yeah,
have come up with. So that was the first thing. I think it's just honesty in terms of people actually developing people, and also at the same time people looking out for their own careers over the good of the team and the good of the mission, right?
yeah,
The mission is most important than anything. Are we
yeah,
doing the mission, not how do I look within it? And also at the same time, when you have a leader that's concerned about their own well-being, that's a tough leader to follow because they're navigating what they can do.
Yeah,
Uh,
and yeah, it's
that
unfortunate because sometimes you'll be second guessing that leader as well because you're not sure whether they're there for me or they're there for themselves, they're there for the greater good, or they're there for self-serve.
they're usually there for themselves and their manager, and HR is there on behalf of your manager, not on behalf of you. So that's just the constant circle. Now, I'm not talking about my experience, but this is
Yeah,
just literally these are the reasons why I think things are held back. And I see it often even in my business now where we're dealing with large organizations as our clients. I see some of the same behaviors. Analysis paralysis
yeah,
happens often as well. And that's the second piece. So the honesty piece and the second piece is individuals tacking on to the winning team.
yeah.
So I love the data people. I find them to be the best, right? We're going to analyze the CRM 20 times a day and keep looking at the same report that doesn't make a cold call happen, that doesn't make a deal close, that doesn't get an invoice sent. We can look at this. It's like literally open the refrigerator thinking it's going to be, no, you didn't go to the grocery store.
That's it.
Keep opening it over and over again. It's like, what is this doing? So analysis paralysis is the second main thing. So honesty, analysis paralysis, and then I'll be quiet. I promise. I have so many opinions, but I'll just keep it at three. And then I think that the third thing is that a false sense of company culture in terms of family. And I think that that's extremely unhealthy. A
Mm,
lot of big corporations try to promote this concept of we are a family. You need to be part of the company culture. Are you a cultural fit? Are you part of this? We need to make sure part of your compensation is based on how well you're culturally fitting into the organization.
yeah,
And, the organization loves you and you're supposed to love the organization and you will give 18 to 20 hours of your day every day for years to this organization and they can fire you in 30 days.
that's
And they
it.
do. I mean, you've seen the mass layoffs, right?
Yeah,
So all those things, I think, hampers progression in terms of your individual ability to score really for yourself to get better. And yeah, those are some of the conversations that I've had. And I did not get fired at Google, but like I left willingly. But those are the conversations I was having in my mind that got me to think differently.
yeah.
Super long answer. Sorry, Darren.
No, but it's a really great answer because organizations that I deal with and people I deal with, whether it be in a group situation or even one-on-one coaching or mentoring, they're often grappling with that predicament. Stand out in an organization that says we're a servant-based organization. We place the customer and our people at the forefront of everything we do, and yet you see the behavior which is narcissistic, divisive. It's anything but what they talk about. And I often say to people that, you know what, you've got a choice to make because you choose to be there right now. And if you choose to be there, then you've got a decision as to whether you continue to be there or whether you look for something else to do. And something else to do is not necessarily looking for another organization that's about the same size. It's getting really clear on what you stand for and what's important to you and then thinking about, okay, what can I do with that? How do I go and help another person? How do I go and help another organization rather than get caught up? And this is where I think a lot of people do get institutionalized. And I remember people that almost wore a badge of honor back at Telstra that they didn't take leave for like 18 months to 2 years because they felt an obligation to the family that they thought their role was so important that if they weren't there, their part of the business, that part of the cog would not operate. And it was unhealthy. It was really unhealthy. But they didn't think anything different about that. It was just fascinating to watch.
No, absolutely. And I can relate to that because I was one of the people that always used to say no sick days. And if you contact me at any time, any day, within 45 minutes, I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was my tagline. And it was true for 5 years of my life. Anytime I got a message, an email, anything, within 45 minutes, I was there. And,
Wow.
that was amazing in my 20s, right?
Yeah.
But like, now the older I'm getting, I'm like, there's more to life. And that family is not really my family, right? Like, let me actually focus on things like family life and, the real work-life balance, which is, am I developing myself?
Yeah.
Not work-life balance, which is kind of work leaning.
Yeah.
Uh, that's something that I had to learn.
So out of the learnings from Google, and obviously the advice that your father gave you as well, there was a few things that happened between Google and establishing Consig. Was there anything specific that happened? Like, was there a catalytic moment that says, yes, now Consig is born, or was it more of an evolution that happened over time? Because I'm really interested in what led you to start Consig, and we'll talk about what you do, and we'll talk about some elements of sales and lead generation stuff like that. But really interested in what led you to create that.
Yeah, well, actually, it was a moment. I had the idea kind of floating around in my mind for while I was in Google, like the last few years. Like, hey, look, wouldn't it be great if there was, but it was conceptual. It
Yeah,
wasn't, I should start this. It was like, wouldn't it be great if there was a service that could just go out there? And my way of phrasing it at the time was based off the movie The Expendables. I was like, wouldn't it be great if there was like the Expendables, right? I remember saying that the Expendables for sales, going around the world and just selling for a lot of these companies that need a lot of help, right?
yeah.
And large, small, medium-sized businesses, whatever, they need help with sales. They don't have this figured out. So I had that idea. I left Google and I went to be a director of an inventory management software company. And I had a lot of growing to do during that time as well, where here I am a cat in a castle and I'm used to castle stuff. Like I'm
Yeah.
used to milk being there. I'm used to the fireplace being there. The grounds, my litter box is going to be cleaned up. And I get to a startup and the litter box is there. And I'm just like, well, who's the person who covers that? And no, right? When it came to operating the CRM, for instance, for sales, and here I am, global director of sales for this inventory management startup, and all the bells and whistles that I was accustomed. I was great at sales, great at the pitch, great at closing business, great at hitting my targets. Was not necessarily prepared for the realities of the privileges that I had in a large organization. And that
Mm.
was an amazing year, amazing company, by the way. They were actually acquired, did good work there, where I had to learn what it's like outside of the castle to sell again, right? Because before Google, I was pretty much a young up and comer.
Yeah.
So being a director, it was a different ball game. And then after that year, I moved on to this kind of portfolio management company, and the situation went really bad. They left me in a really bad position, and I was telling myself, you know what? Even these people don't have it figured out. The startups don't have it figured out. The large enterprises, and I was in such a bad spot, really, really, really bad in Singapore, where I was pretty much I either just need to go home or try to wait for, I don't know, a job at Microsoft or HubSpot or somebody please pick me up on the line. And extremely vulnerable at the time. And I remember walking outside in the middle of the night and then saying, you know what? I'm going to start my own Expendables at the time. And I called my dad. My dad's, a big factor. And it was funny because my dad's a very well-off person, self-made guy, really well-off type of father that wouldn't give you $20 for a pizza though. Right.
You got
You
to earn
know,
it, dude.
he's got it all. He's got it all, but I gotta earn it. Like it was 20 feet. I gotta go out and mow the lawn, right? I had to earn every, and I never asked my dad for anything, but I was in a bad spot. It was bad. And I remember calling him and I said, I'm gonna start my own company. I'm just gonna do it, and this is what I'm gonna do. And it was the first time ever where I mean, it was just a funny voice because here I am. I got a Chinese degree. I got Google. I got all this stuff, and then for the first time, I heard my dad say, "Yes, son. Yes." I was like,
Yeah.
guy, like the pride. Like, he was just all right. I was like, whoa, okay, I must be doing something right. So I buckled down and I said, look, I'm in a bad spot with this because I'm completely vulnerable. I was kind of screwed out of my last company. But I just need to know that you have my back. I'm not going to call you for anything. I'm not going to ask you for money. I'm kind of asking you for money, but I'm not asking you for money. Don't send anything yet. Just I need to know it's there so I can have the confidence to move
Yeah.
forward. And he said yes, and I never had to ask him for it. And I came back and I was charged up. My dad support. I remember sitting down and I was watching. I was doing two things. I was watching the Godfather, I was in this like mode, and I was reading very controversial. I was watching The Godfather, and I was reading Eric Prince's Civilian Warriors, which is
Right.
about Blackwater. This is where the sales mercenary thing kind of comes up, because I'm reading Civilian Warriors and I was looking at his history. Now, granted, Blackwater is very controversial, but he was a Navy SEAL who ended up starting a training group and then ended up being an independent contractor for pretty much the government that he used to work for.
Yeah.
Right. I kind of saw that being a Navy SEAL is equivalent to being the Google, being a sales trainer, which is like how I was able to kind of develop salespeople after Google, and then thinking about taking those individuals and starting kind of a renegade group
Mm.
that you can contract back out. So that's kind of how the mercenary thing came from, was actually Eric Prince's Civilian Warriors. And then that just opened it all up for me. And then I started to come up with this concept of, okay, look, my expendables idea, but look, it's like a mercenary group, because I want to be in, but not in to the point to where the people who don't understand sales would steer us in the directions that don't help them. Sometimes we have to
Yeah.
help people save themselves, kind of thing.
Fascinating. So, how did you then, going from that predicament with that idea, I'm not gonna say that was an overnight success, because it's been 7 years in the making. And the fact you said you didn't have to go to your dad for any funding, which is fantastic. Just take us through, because there'll be people listening to this who are in a sales role right now, and they might be behind in their target. They might be really struggling. They might be thinking, you know what, my business has given me a 10x target this year, and I've got no hope in hell of making that. What the hell am I going to be doing, right? Um, from a practical sense, was there one or two things that you're focused on, or was it just a case of, I'm just going to throw as much up against the wall as I possibly can? Some of it's going to stick, and whatever sticks, I'm going to run with that and see how far I can take it, and then I'm going to add some more stuff onto it. What from a practical sense, um, how did you progress? So certainly in the first 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. So, one, everybody around me was saying that only, 2% of businesses last throughout the first year. So you have to not call those people.
That's
Because no
that's
matter what you're
right.
doing, no matter what you're doing is crazy. Now, if you're you're in a crazy world anyway, if whether you're a sales rep in an organization with a forecast or you're an entrepreneur with a forecast, both are equally crazy concepts. Because
Mm,
as we know with COVID, you have no idea what's going to happen, right? So you
that's
have to
it.
accept that in general, that you cannot, it's going to be what it's going to be. But what you can control is your ability and your skill sets. So I would say the first 6 to 12 months, one thing I did learn coming out of Google is work for your sales career. Don't work for a company.
Yeah.
Work for your sales career. So even if you're in a company, you are like an athlete. You have quarters, you have seasons, you have your stats. Look at your stats and look at who you are as an asset to the organization. Once I kind of understood that, when I left Google and went out, it was easy for me in the first 6 to 12 months to see myself as, okay, well, I'm an A-list athlete on this brand new team with a pink logo.
Yeah.
That's first, right? I'm gonna win some games. I'm gonna
Yeah.
lose some games. But every time I show up, we're gonna play as if it's the playoffs.
Yeah.
Every
Okay.
single time. I'm gonna do all the calls I need to do. I'm gonna do all the emails I need to do. I need to do all the branding and when you're starting a business, you have to do it all.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I needed to do all the type of leveraging that I could possibly do in terms of just knowledge base. I was writing content. I was doing a ton of stuff, networking every day. I was constantly outside. So I did all the pieces that needed to happen. So with that type of aggression and persistence, I got to see the challenges, whether it's a high target, low target, ramp target, whatever they want to call it. You have to sometimes think in your mind, this is just another day in the office, right? Does a pilot get nervous when there's turbulence?
Yeah. No.
It's part of the game. There's always, I've never liked a target that I've got. I mean, there's not a
Yeah.
single target. I mean, if it was $1, I'd be like, why? A whole dollar? This is insane. 2 years to get it, like, so either way,
What?
there's never a target that you're going to be comfortable with. So it's just another day in the office. I've seen bad targets before. I've
Yeah.
seen insane targets before.
Yeah.
Now, if they're things that are beyond the moment of reality, like, $20 million in 48 hours, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just not logical. But if it's something that's, based in something that is beyond what you think can happen, but not so far that it's ridiculous, Well, you're clearly the most talented person that you know, or at least you should be thinking that way in terms of being a salesperson or a sales rep or a manager. You should say, in my mind, I am equally, if not more capable than anybody I know to be able to attain this because my sales skills are things that I can control. I
Yep.
cannot control the target. I cannot control the close, but I can control my pitch. I can
Yep.
control my availability. I can control my outreach. I can control my analysis, my research. I can control all these things.
Mm.
So come on with the market. I'm going to be the most terrifying version of that. And if I miss it, then it couldn't have been touched because I did everything you could possibly think.
So literally it is, as you're talking there, I'm thinking it is the evolution of the cat to the lion,
Yeah.
where the cat is given things to them to maintain, I guess, comfort in an environment. And you're now a lion. You're not a cage lion. You're now a lion in a big ecosystem that you, and I don't want to sound, mercenary or merciless, but it's either it's fight or it's survive or not, isn't it?
To be killed. I've seen targets before.
Yeah.
I've seen targets, I've seen, and I always say that whenever even my team, I have a really large organization. Oh my God, this target, like, you think we haven't seen bad targets before? Like,
Well, here's
there's over 100 of us. There's one target and over 100 of us. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? It's 100 lions here and one gazelle. Let's go. Let's go. There's 100 of us.
that gazelle stands no chance.
Right, exactly. And the joke is I've always kind of put Chicago culture into it. It's like, okay, let's go. Let's see what happens. 100 lions versus one gazelle. I'm putting my bet on the 100 lions.
Absolutely. Now, here's what I wanted to ask you around that is the big targets, because I've got a certain philosophy and I'd be really interested in your philosophy. The target is the target, right? And you mentioned before, focus on the stuff that you've got control over. Now, in most cases, salespeople and sales leaders to some degree have no control over the target that they're given because it's provided, certainly in big organization, it's flowing down from the board and it is what it is, right? What's your approach then to the target? Because I know a lot of sales leaders in bigger organizations that every conversation, every huddle they have, it's aligned to that target to the point where all of a sudden you've got people in the team who are, let's be say, shit scared of that target and thinking, how the hell are we going to do that? So what's your philosophy on that? Because mine is we've got to make progress and thinking about what are the disciplines we have to put in place on a daily basis. That if we repeat that over time, we should give ourselves the opportunity of hitting the target. The target's always going to be there, but I'm not going to spend all my time fixated on that because I'll do my head in.
Yep.
What's your thought on that?
Well, first thing is as a salesperson, you need to recognize the fact that you are a professional. You are the professional. You are the prize fighter for that target. They are electing you to hit that target. So if you're scared of it, quit. Because once you're willing to take on and try to hit that target, you have now signed up to take on that target.
Yeah.
That's what it is. You've done a verbal commitment, you've gone in. Now you're opted into this target. Now, once you're opted into this target, that's what it was. So you know what that target is. Now, the things you can control is, have you been researching the market? Have you been looking at low-hanging fruits? Are you having all the conversations you need to be having? Are you having all the follow-ups? 30% of most of your targets are pretty much done by active follow-up, right?
Mm.
Follow-ups, getting on people's calendars and just doing proper follow-up.
Yeah.
Another thing is that, are you pitching in context, or are you pitching your product as if a billboard? If you find yourself running through your slides saying, welcome to XYZ company. So here at XYZ company, we do, all right, well, you're not having a conversation. And frankly, that could have been a YouTube video, really.
That's
Like, you
right.
don't need to be there. Like, and AI can do that, right? You need to have a
Yeah.
context where you're researching who you're talking to, and are you following the company style of how you're supposed to pitch? Or are you having a real business conversation trying to connect with people, right?
Mm.
Are you managing your relationships in pipeline? These are things you can actually control. And are you okay with failure? Because as soon as you don't care, it happens.
Mm.
You 2x your target because you're there focusing on your skills, how you're attacking the market, what you know, your knowledge. And then from there, you're quoting based on that. You're quoting based on the situation, not based on what your target says. In
Yeah.
fact, you're probably disqualifying more leads
Yeah.
often than not in your pitch because you realize it's not going to be a fit,
Yeah.
right? Versus closing bad deals because you just want to exit the number. That makes you a professional. And then
Yeah.
once you're a professional, you have control of any target.
Mm.
And if you think a target's really that ridiculous, then just don't take it. And you can actually articulate why it's impossible. Or you can say, like, look, if I miss this, I hope this is not seen as negative because frankly, you're not going to get $10 million in 30 days. Like it's just
Yeah.
your product is $9.99 a month.
Yeah.
Be that mathematically on an hourly basis doesn't make sense. So, if you're willing to kind of have that conversation, then great. But if you're not willing to, you signed up for it. Focus on what you know how to do,
Yeah.
right? You know how to call, you know how to pitch and get better at your craft. Do some self-reflection. Why did they say no? Or
Yeah.
why did they suddenly seem weird when I quoted the price? Or how come when I call into this market, they're more responsive? Like, what about that self-reflection? Don't rely on, what your company has given you in terms of here are the best objection handling.
Here's a script you can use.
Here's a script that you could do to go find
Insert
a wife.
here.
Like, it's like, this is how you go find a wife. Here's a script. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, you're not going to go find the love of your life through a script somebody gave you, right? That happens organically the same way a business deal. Because keep in
Yeah.
mind, you're doing outreach. Somebody who never met you on Monday, by Wednesday, could be signing a check towards you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other factors there other than the script and the mantras of the company.
Absolutely. And the buyer, for example, has to be in the right cycle to ready to take any action. So it's not, you might catch lightning in a bottle, but it's not going to happen every single day. The thing I also wanted to chat to you about, Alistair, was sorry, William, is the I saw I had a pop up on my screen just then come from a guy called Alistair. So you know how you see things?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I know exactly.
I should have actually put my phone on do not disturb. I'm sure you've been called worse.
All good.
William, on one of the videos I saw you run recently was the fact that you think the art of sales is under attack. Can you just talk about a little bit about that? Because I know that, I mean, sales continues. It is the oldest profession on the planet, but it does continue to evolve. And it's interesting that people today, and I'd love your take on this as well, in the Singapore market and the markets in Southeast Asia, a lot of people look at sales as a bit of, oh, I don't want to be pushy and stuff like that. And most people don't want to be sold to, but
Yep.
on the contrary, a lot of people like to buy. So what's your take on sales being under attack? And what are some of the key challenges that you've identified today that your business is focusing on and helping organizations get better penetration?
So yeah, absolutely. And I think sales being under attack now is different than what it was before, but it was different. I mean, I think sales has always been seen as negative. I think since the United States auto market, right? The whole
Yeah.
concept of dirty car salesman, right? Selling you a car and then it loses value as soon as you drive it off, and he's going to say everything he wants, right? Yes, it has air conditioning and anti-lock brakes, and yeah, just take the car, right? That really gave salespeople a bad name, I think, in the 50s and 60s in the US. Then those practices, being very profitable, ended up moving into the finance industries where you're suddenly getting the credit card calls and the banking calls for loans and insurance and things like that. That's 80s and 90s. Then during the 90s, you have America Online and the internet thing. And then those consultants now who are very profitable for finance moved into tech, right? And now you're starting to see this and that and these services. The telemarketer is a very negative phrase. The salesperson, on my LinkedIn, I have salesperson on purpose
Yeah.
because it's such a negative thing. But today, sales is under attack in a different way since COVID. The heavily reliance on inbound opportunities, the heavily reliance on marketing, the difficulties for an outbound outreach, right? You have so many spam blockers these days, phone trees that limit cold calls. You have GDPR stuff now, which
Yeah.
if you even sneeze at someone in Germany to say hello, you're suddenly going to be reported to some bureau, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, you are an electric company and I sell batteries. I just thought it would make sense, right? I mean,
Who
I
would
don't
have
know.
thought?
Then they're like, what is your business purpose? I'm like, well, I thought it was obvious. I mean, this is like we're practically the same company. In fact, you're next door, So because of that over the last 6 years, I would say 5 to 6 years, has really impacted any new up and coming salesperson. Most salespeople that are sitting today that just got in the game, let's say in 2017, 2018,
Yeah.
how many opportunities have they really had to practice and perfect their pitch?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been rejected hundreds of thousands of times before I even entered Google, right? I knew what a no was like. I knew what my voice was like. I knew how to position things. I knew like, this is a really awkward conversation, or this is so now you have sales reps, sales managers, people with a bunch of sales in their title,
Yeah.
even most CEOs and C-level people that really don't have any real sales experience. And their concept of sales experience is either running through a slide if they get the off opportunity to do that because they haven't done that enough to know that's wrong, or their concept of sales is we should be getting large amounts of responses from the market just because we exist, because we have an ad platform out, or because we have a website.
Mm.
Where anybody from, let's say, the world of 15 years ago sales says, okay, well, a website is great, but it doesn't sell for you, right? And yeah, your ads are great to get views and stuff like that, but it doesn't really get you a deal that's over 10 grand.
Yeah.
I'd be able to sell, apps for $100 a
Mm.
month or maximum, or maybe $500 or something max. But once you
Yeah.
start getting into a real sell, which is 5, 10, 20K and upwards to millions, there's no way that's not that's happening without an actual salesperson putting that together for them, putting that
Yeah.
package, putting that narrative together, getting the pain points. And that's being missed. So a lot of the larger enterprises are relying on kind of practices that are not designed for their business level to pretty much bring up their staff. So in general, there's a large pocket of inexperienced salespeople that have a lot of years on their resume, which is like 5, 6 years. But you look
Yeah.
at what they were doing, they haven't done cold calls. They
Yeah.
haven't been rejected enough. They haven't actually had real pitches under their belt. It's kind of like the pilot analogy. How many hours do you have flying?
Mm.
How many times have people told you no? How
Yeah.
many phones have slammed down? Now, you might have had 30 a day,
Yeah.
but another person from 15 years ago had 200 a day. And
Yeah.
over time, you start to develop a rhythm.
Yeah.
So that was my point about the recent sales attack. But salespeople are always considered scum anyway, regardless of the.
But as you're describing that, I'm thinking, well, that is the classic example of a cat within a castle versus a lion within in the forest, because the true salesperson, I'm not saying people listening to this are not true salespeople, but if you haven't gone through the trenches, it's pretty hard to understand what the trenches look like. And we need to be resilient as salespeople, and certainly as sales leaders. What I've seen is, and I often used to use this quote in business, people are often promoted to a high level of incompetence, and they may have been placed on a great account in a big organization, and because they happened to be at the right place at the right time and they caught lightning in a bottle, everything came to them. They haven't had to really work for it. And because of that result, they then get promoted, and they're promoted into a sales leadership position, but they're not necessarily having the capabilities to be able to teach the principles and teach the resilience factors that people need to have, because it's not easy, right? And it's not for everybody. But the ones that can do it and the ones that can stay in the game are the ones that can ultimately achieve some fantastic results.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not a leader if you can't repeat yourself.
Mm.
You cannot duplicate yourself and give it to your team.
Mm.
And it's one of the most common pitfalls. And as you said, like, people are getting promoted because they're right place, right time, or they got in early, or there was a nice pocket, like a sweet spot that, the deals are just rolling in kind of thing. And it doesn't necessarily represent an outbound sell, a
Yeah.
cold approach, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest problems and one of the most common issues right now. So I've never learned anything in the sales process by closing. And I actually do know a number. I won't say on this podcast, but I know down to the cent how much I've sold in my lifetime, because
Yeah.
I always calculate, because I track my sales career, and I like to see, how much business have I sold
Yeah.
for companies, on behalf of companies, since I started sales. And one thing that I kind of have realized is that, ultimately, I have never learned anything from any dollar that I sold. but I can tell you a bunch of lessons that I learned from all the rejections, all the objections,
Yeah.
all hang-ups, all the cuss outs, whatever, you name it, right? I've never progressed from any dollar that I've sold. I've only progressed from the things going wrong.
And it's a great lesson, and people always talk about it. And people hearing this, they'll be saying, "Yeah, I know that, I understand that, but I still I still don't want to be rejected. I'd rather avoid that conversation with that chief information officer because there's a chance that they'll say no, and if they say no, then what am I going to do then? At least if I don't have the conversation or delay it for another week, I can still live in this beautiful place of I think there's a deal there. I'm feeling comfortable about it. I can say all the right things. You've got to get into it. You've got to front up.
Well, there's another way. There's another way. You can still reach that euphoria and still have that conversation on that day with that chief information officer. Have 17 other conversations with chief information officers from 17 other companies scheduled that week.
That's right.
That's how you reach euphoria, right? Just you are one of 17. This is just another day of the office. Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Yeah.
don't want it? Okay. I got another one of you at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
And that's your pipeline. That's
Yeah.
regional sales pipeline. That's why you have volume. That's why outbound sales has a stereotype of being A-type personality and aggressive. But actually, I'm an introvert. I'm actually very B-type personality, but
Yeah.
not in my work style in terms of my volume. My
Yes.
conversations are very B-type.
Yeah.
I listen, but in terms of the intensity of pipeline, reaching out, having conversations, setting up meetings. So if someone's scared of a pitch, the first thing you need to tell yourself is, I must not have enough pitches.
Yeah.
I really must only, this must be all I'm riding on right now.
Yeah.
And that's why you're worried. You're not worried because that matters or that person is going to intimidate you. You're only intimidated because you're probably relying on it too much because you just haven't done the activity.
That's it. And that's it. So as we bring this into a close, it's you've said a number of really cool things, and one of the biggest is control the stuff you've got control over. And without putting words in your mouth, when you're talking about the different CIOs, it's a thing of, well, I've got to remove myself from the pressure of having to get the perfect outcome. Because if I've only got one meeting with a CIO next week, and I'm going to put all of those eggs in that basket, and if by God that doesn't come off, then what's going to happen now? But if you've got five or six, then it's like, you know what will be will be. I'm going to be the best version of myself. And if we're a match, if I have a solution that matches the problem the customer has, hey, we'll probably do business and it's all good.
And guess what happens? If you have five lined up, if you got two, that was more than that one you were worried about. And guess what? There's a chance that you got all five.
Yeah,
And it's, you're a superhero. And how'd you do it? Well, actually, I was trying to run away from one. And I just loaded it up and look at that, I got all five. Oh, look, I'm amazing. Everybody, they're gonna give you a cake and a, employee of the month, top earner, right? And meanwhile,
absolutely.
your anxiety, right? That was what was going on.
That's it. That's it. So William, as we wrap, as we look forward in the rest of 2024 and beyond, I'm not going to get you to look at the crystal ball, but what's something that you can leave us with in terms of either an approach, a philosophy, a mindset that's going to help people even take that next step?
Well, one, don't be intimidated or fall for the gimmicks of society when you're looking at things online, right? For instance, AI. AI is going to take over. AI is going to replace sales. Do we remember 3, 4 years ago, crypto,
Yeah,
right? Well, that's not showing up for some weird reason. Where is it? I'm looking for the crypto conversation, right? It's not as strong as it was those years before. Sometimes people can fall for the gimmicks and the waves of, what blogs are saying and what the quote unquote specialists are saying and all that.
yeah,
Focus on, if you're a salesperson in an organization, focus on your sales career, your
mm,
stat, what you're doing. If you're a business owner, focus on specifically what you need to do to drive revenue for your business.
yeah,
Get better at sales, get better at business development and prospecting. Focus on the hard stuff. Hit
yeah,
the gym, like I said, just
yeah,
hit the gym.
yeah.
That's really all it is. Because all this other stuff is going to be fly by night and there's no shortcuts. And once you get to the other side of it and you get that comfort of knowing how you can generate revenue on your own without any assistance or anything like that, then nothing can really stop you. You'll be impervious to bullets regardless of what's out there.
It's it's fantastic advice. And as a business owner myself, it's a fantastic reminder that, you know what, control what you can control, and don't put so much, I guess, pressure on having to get a perfect outcome. Just do the fundamentals over and over and over again. And it's amazing what's going to happen. So, William, greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy day in Singapore. I know you're traveling back to Chicago next week, so I wish you a very safe trip. It's been an absolute pleasure actually having you on the podcast. So, thank you for the wisdom that you've shared today, mate.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Good on you, mate. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.